Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bridging the Gap. Make sure to leave a like on this video down below and subscribe. My name is Alvin. I lean right on most issues, and I'll be representing the Republican side.
My name is Luke. I lean left on most issues, and I'll be representing the Democratic side. Hey guys, today in this video, Alvin and I will be looking at the aftermath of the 2024 presidential election, and really all the elections in 2024. There was a crap ton across the nation, and some of the ramifications of that.
Yeah, so we did a video on the update a few days after the election. Now we're a little bit more than a week out from the election by the time you're seeing this video. And in terms of the results, it's been pretty clear for a while now that the dust has settled, that Trump has won the election for a while. He's going to finish with 312 electoral votes, winning the popular vote as well by 1.5% or so when everything is counted from these very slow states on the West Coast. And in terms of the swing states, he swept all the swing states. Obviously, you can see them. Uh, and there's the Senate and the House that we'll get into soon.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned there, yeah, all the seven swing states that we kind of outlined, um, Trump won all of them going into this election, and yeah, he did very well. Uh, I would say, yeah, what's interesting is yeah, like we have an election here where Trump's sweeping all the swing states. He's clinching the popular vote for the first time. It seems like he's on track to win it by about 1.5. I think it's been the margin there has been closening a bit with mail-ins coming in, but. Yeah. Yeah, what's interesting, I mean, there's a couple interesting trends to look at in this election. I mean, generally, of course, like the whole country shifted right. I mean, yeah, you could go to the trend map there and you could see just waves of red. You could see a couple blue dots with like some suburbs in Atlanta and in Western North Carolina shifting left. I think those are mainly isolated to more swingy states, though. But yeah, generally, like I would say yeah, like on average, the average state swung 6 to 7 points to the right. Swing states swung about 3 points to the right. Yeah, just a really good election for Trump here.
Yeah, I will say that obviously Republicans would love to win the elections like this every time, but there are some warning signs for Republicans in the future, like you were sort of alluding to earlier. Republicans were a lot weaker relative to the nation in the swing states, showing that they might have some cracks in terms of their ground game or persuasion where it matters. The Kamala Harris ground game and the Democrats overall were a lot stronger than the Republicans, from what I can tell, is in the swing states. And Trump found a lot of his gains mainly in very safe states like New Jersey and Florida and Texas and New
Hmm.
York, where he improved a lot better. It's also going to hurt Republicans that the Republican coalition, the Trump coalition, is now made of a lot more working class voters, a lot more minority voters. They're not going to be turning out in midterm years as much as higher college educated voters, richer voters, whiter voters that are shifting towards the Democrat Party.
Hmm.
The Democrats are going to likely do a lot better in midterm elections, and they start out as the heavy favorites to take the House in 2026. For example, with their coalition being more in the higher propensity voter range. You can also look at the fact that even though the nation as a whole shifted very fast to the right, states like Georgia, their Atlanta suburbs, for example, they shifted to the left nonetheless. And that's going to be present a problem for Republicans in the future. They took Georgia this time around, but it's going to be increasingly difficult to do so in 2028 when there's a more neutral environment, a less anti-incumbent environment. And I think Democrats, while they are reeling from the results in 2024, they have some optimism going into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, in terms of like higher propensity, voters with higher education, Democrats did hold their ground at least, in some of those areas. So yes, that is a pretty good sign going into like say 2026 or off year elections because, usually only more educated, and voters who vote more of the time vote in those elections. And if those are leaning more toward Democrats, they should regain some of their losses that they saw this year. And yeah, and one other point I want to mention before we move on to the Senate and House is, I mean, despite Kamala losing here, I don't believe she ran a bad campaign. And I think you did kind of bring this up a bit. Um, in the states where she actually campaigned, which is of course the swing states and the focus of the two major parties, like the swing was much less. So I think that implies to me just that the national environment was horrid. Like, people were upset about the economy. They did not like the Biden administration. But when Harris actually got on the ground, she was able to at least halt some of those losses. And I think if we did not have that little switcheroo in the summer where we swapped out Biden for Harris, this could have been a lot worse for
Yeah,
Democrats.
I largely agree with that. There were some, there were some leaked internal polls from the Biden camp post-election that showed Trump getting 400 plus electoral votes, and I don't know what path there would be, but I think you might see New Jersey, Virginia, New Mexico, and Minnesota, flip Republican in a Biden run race.
Yeah,
In this case, I think you would see these states probably go for Trump. It would probably the national environment would be an absolute blowout. And
I agree. Yeah.
yeah, and I think Republicans would have swept the competitive Senate seats even more than they did. And I guess this is a good transition over to the Senate race where Republicans now officially have 52, but technically they have 53 seats
Yeah.
here. Pennsylvania is headed to a recount because it is within 0.5%, but multiple places like The Hill, DDHQ, the Decision Desk, and AP News have called the race for Dave McCormick. Casey has not conceded, but the race is pretty much over. Recounts never move the needle by that many votes, and there's 25,000 votes separating the two. It's not going to happen for Casey, except if Philadelphia finds 100,000 more ballots. And 53 seats for the Republicans. I mean, we can talk about the ramifications of that, but largely, there are two big ones. Number one is that it uh, almost puts Democrats outside of the reach of taking back the Senate in 2026. Democrats would have to flip four seats in the Senate now to take back the Senate in
Yeah.
2026. That means they would have to definitely knock off Susan Collins, that would run in Maine, Tom Tillis in North Carolina, and win that special election in Ohio, probably if Sherrod Brown runs. And then they would have to run against John Cornyn in Texas, who has announced for re-election, which is a very tough task, or maybe knock off Alaska or Iowa. These seats are very difficult, and that's going to be big for Trump as he tries to maintain hold of the judiciary and continue to pass legislation. Even in the case where he loses the House in 2026, he can keep those conservative justices and judges coming through for the Republicans for years to come, especially if Sotomayor does not make it to 2028. That would be devastating for Democrats really if the court went to 7-2 with Thomas and Alito potentially also stepping down for Republicans to nominate younger successors. There's also the fact that Republicans will have to govern. The election's over now. Republicans are going to have to govern for at least the next 2 years, depending on what happens in the midterms. And Republicans with 53 seats are going to have a pretty decent amount of leeway, although I don't know if it's enough runway really to get a lot of these more extreme cabinet picks through the Senate. And we'll talk about that soon as we talk about the cabinet after we talk about the House. But what are your thoughts on the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, like seeing as this is a redder sort of year, I my immediate thoughts is it is turning out better than it could have been. I mean, 53, I mean, is still pretty bad for Democrats. Republicans definitely have a pretty good majority and in the Senate, and that's definitely enough to pass some of Trump's more extreme nominees. I mean, actually, it's probably borderline on that, but again, like most of Trump's nominees are going to get through with this kind of Senate. Yes, that obviously favors him. But yeah, I would also note like the ticket splitting is pretty strong. Like in four states, Trump won. They also elected a Democrat to the Senate. Elisa Slotkin won in Michigan, Tammy Baldwin won in Wisconsin, Ruben Gallego won in Arizona, and Jackie Rosen in Nevada. So yeah, like this election kind of also marks a return to ticket splitting, something that we've kind of seen die out since 2016, but it reemerged a bit in 2022. and seems like again in 24. So I think more voters are willing to split their ticket between a Dem and a Republican.
Agreed. And I think another lesson we can take from ticket splitting is that voters heavily favor incumbents and they heavily favor moderates, in my opinion. I mean, you had candidates like Larry Hogan run well ahead of Trump in Maryland. He's known as a moderate Republican, former governor. You had Elizabeth Warren run way behind Kamala Harris in the state of Massachusetts, for example, known as a progressive. And a lot of the other generic Democrats that aren't as tied to the Biden administration, like Kamala Harris's, ran way ahead of Harris. They're also incumbents, so take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, down ballot Democrats seem to do better. I think some of it is also just Trump voters just walking into the ballot box, checking Trump, and leaving. A lot of these ballots for Trump, for example, in Nevada, had no vote for Senate. And if they went to Sam Brown would be the next senator from Nevada. And you can see that in states like Wisconsin as well. You know, Trump voters just didn't bother to check Hovde, and their ballots were just empty down ballot, and that's going to hurt Republicans. They're becoming they're getting the voter bases that are more lower propensity, which might be good in presidential years. But these voters are less educated. They're going to care less about the Senate race. They don't really know the Senate candidates, and they just leave it blank. Anyways, we'll move on to the House of Representatives, where now Republicans have officially gathered a majority, officially 218 in New York Times. But looking at these competitive races here, Alaska is almost certainly going to go to Nick Begich, who's going to be able to flip the seat back into Republican hands here once ranked choice voting settles down. You have Iowa 1, which is also practically over, barring some sort of big recount upset. Marinette Miller Meeks is going to pull off a second razor thin race. Back in 2020, this was in the single digits, I think. She won by like 6 votes or something. And then, uh, yeah, I mean, that already puts Republicans at 220. And then, it basically hinges on California 13 to see if they can get 221. I think Steele is basically running out of room. Derek Tran there, the Democrats going to win, and they're going to hold all these races down here too.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. There's like only two races that are still sort of up in the air. Yeah, California's 13th and 45th. Yeah, from what I've heard, the 13th seems about like a 50-50, and the 45th is now leaning toward Democrats. But yeah, generally, when this is all said and done, Democrats are actually, relative to 2022, Democrats are actually set to gain 1 to 2 seats, relative to 2022, and where it ended there. So yeah, I find that interesting because I mean, it does seem like Democrats fared better in the House than they did in the presidency, at least. We kind of predicted this. Like I think I mentioned in our House prediction video that I was more confident that the Democrats had a better shot of winning the House of Representatives. And I think here this is a good example that we came very, 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 very close. I think if you look in a lot of blues, especially when it comes to like bluer states like New York and California, where Republicans saw gains in 2022, Democrats saw a decent amount of flips in those areas. I think there was 3 in New York, and it seems like there's going to be at least 2 in California, 1 in Oregon. Um, so yeah, like that allows those games kind of offset the couple of districts the GOP gained this year, and is going to make the chamber ultimately closer. And Mike Johnson kind of struggled to govern with his slim House majority in 2022. So it's going to be interesting to see if he could handle it this time. I imagine it'll be better because he has Trump whipping for him. Um, but again, they have a very thin majority to work with in the House here.
Yeah, and to that point, the thin majority is really fought over in these small redistricting battles that you saw over the course of after the 2020 census came in. Obviously, since the midterms, you had North Carolina, reinstituting their gerrymander that netted Republicans 3 whole seats. That might be the amount that's significant for the majority if they end up at 220. You had the gerrymanders in places like New York that were being fought over, Illinois, where Democrats did a very fantastic gerrymander. I will give them credit for that. You had Nevada, which The gerrymander barely held on in District 3 that they pulled off there. I mean, in a lot of these places, like Florida, Republicans pulled off a good gerrymander that made sure they kept the House. I mean, in these battles that were going state by state, it seems like it's going to all come down to them as Republicans will end up at either 220 or 221 seats, barring some sort of upset there. And in terms of the Democrat side, yeah, Democrats are going to find themselves in the minority yet again. I will say you'd rather hold the Senate than the House when you have the presidency, just because of being able to stock up on the judiciary branch. But the House controls the power to investigate and subpoena, and that can be very significant. If Democrats held the House, not only would they be able to block legislation that they disliked, but with a thin majority, they would have the power to impeach President Trump, I guess President-elect Trump, and they would have the power to investigate him and, sort of waste his time as he tries to force, his agenda through. But now Republicans are going to have trifecta. We're going to be seeing what they can make of it. And now I think we'll move on and finish off with a few minutes of talking about Trump's cabinet picks, which, is very, very interesting. They've been dropping like a reality TV show, but I'm gonna let you take it from here because I know you're gonna be ranting for a few minutes here on
Oh.
how some of these are a little crazy.
I mean, yeah, I mean, crazy is an understatement. Yeah, these are kind of bonkers. I mean, like usually when okay, the cabinet of the president this is under the executive branch. They're responsible for implementing policy and structuring the president's policy and advising him. Usually you want these people to be experts, people who know what they're doing. So far, I mean, to start, I mean, Trump nominated. So some of these nominations, I'll say, were pretty okay to start. Like they're pretty standard for a Republican presidency. Um, Chief of Staff Susan Wiles, she's a part of the Trump campaign. I mean, in a chief of staff role, yeah, you want someone kind of close to you managing that, and she's very good at managing Trump. Uh, she, she was very integral to the campaign and ensuring that Trump didn't make missteps. So having her in that sort of role made sense. Secretary of State, you had Marco Rubio, a sitting senator. Um, Really like a foreign policy wonk. So I think that I think in those roles, Evan, like national, I think the advisor for national defense also, Mike Waltz, is kind of in the same role, like China Hawk. But yeah, like in those roles, yes, it makes sense. This looks like a normal Republican cabinet. Then we got some recent crazier drops. You know, I think today we had for Department of Health and Human Services RFK Robert F. Kennedy Jr. A vaccine denier who thinks phones can cause like cancer. Yeah, that guy going to lead the nation's health organizations. Um, we have Tulsi Gabbard, a former representative, and someone who's very sympathetic toward Russia and Syria's regime for running our intelligence agencies, which I think is a little not great. Another weird one was Pete Hegseth, a Fox News host. He has some experience in the army, but I don't think enough to be running the Department of Defense as him serving as Secretary of Defense. Lee Zeldin for EPA with no environmental experience. Yeah, we've gotten some crazy drops recently, and I don't know. I think they're pretty scary to be honest. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I misheard you, but did you not talk about Matt Gaetz as
Oh
Attorney
yeah,
General?
I
I mean,
did.
I don't know how you
I
missed
yeah,
the
I did.
one
I
the
did
one
miss that one. Yeah.
the
Wait.
one that I thought you'd talk about.
Oh
Matt
yeah,
Gaetz.
you're right. There's a lot of bad ones. There's so many bad ones that I forgot to talk about arguably one of the worst. Sorry, the RFK drop today took me off guard. So now, for Attorney General, we have the ultimate MAGA loyalist in representing the Panhandle of Florida, Matt Gaetz. for our Attorney General, heading the Justice Department of the United States, a guy who's suspected of pedophilia. So, yeah, we've kind of devolved, and I think Matt Gaetz in that position would be especially scary because he's going to be like an attack dog. Like he'd actually just, I think he would definitely go after just whoever Trump doesn't like, very willingly. So yeah, yeah, that is on me for forgetting to mention that. But yes, there's just a lot of this is a lot. This is a lot. I mean, it's still to be seen whether these can actually get through the Senate, but already, like, Democrats were given a lot of warnings about what a Trump presidency could look like. And, I'm starting to fear that they're going to be very right here. But, I guess we'll see. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, no clue how you missed Matt Gates. I think a lot of these picks are not all too unexpected, seeing as how uh, under Trump v1, Trump 1.0, a lot of his picks turned against him at some point. Really wants to build a cabinet full of complete loyalists this time so that they don't turn against him this time. I think to that effect, he's doing a good job because, just looking at it, everyone is sort of in debt to him for elevating them to, higher roles. They don't really have that many credentials, other than a few congressmen and women and obviously Marco Rubio from the Senate, everyone else is sort of in some sort of lower position that isn't really in government. Tulsi
Hmm.
Gabbard's not in government, RFK's not in government. They're sort of just being elevated by Trump, and they owe Trump everything because they have nothing back to go to outside of their secretary role. So Trump's
That's
definitely
true.
going to make these people complete loyalists. They either have demonstrated their utmost loyalty, such as Matt Gaetz, Elise Stefanik, or they are from nothing. Lee Zeldin, failed gubernatorial candidate, although maybe not failed considering how he sort of made Republicans take the House 2 years ago. But Kristi Noem running out of time as governor. Some no names that are in these non confirmation needed. A lot of these people would be nothing without Trump. Elon Musk would be nothing without Trump right now. Vivek would be nothing without Trump right now. Even his border czar, Thomas Homan, would be nothing without Trump. Really, the only people that would be something without Trump is JD Vance as senator, and obviously he is the vice president. And so a lot of these people owe Trump complete loyalty. They have nothing to go back to. And so they're not going to turn against Trump. If they get fired, which Trump definitely is going to fire some of these people at some point, that's for sure. They have nothing to go back to, so they're gonna definitely support Trump. I think some of these picks I really don't agree with either, but it just is what it is. I think it's not too unexpected. We're gonna see how it plays out because there's so many open spots left that I don't know if it's going to get better or worse or more establishment or more not,
Yeah.
because he started out with, I think, the most reasonable ones. He started off with Marco Rubio, Lee Stefanik, and Pete Hegseth, which I can't believe is the more reasonable one here. But you
Eh.
move on, yeah, you move on to Matt Gaetz and RFK, and we're only on what, day 3 or 4? So you move on to some of these other ones. I don't even know who else I can think of to lead these roles, but they're going to exist at some point. And I think that pedophilia scandal with Matt Gaetz is going to drop soon because let's be real, Democrats, are also on the ethics committee, and I think they might leak it. And if one of them doesn't leak it, I think one of their staffers are bound to leak it. Let's be very real
I
right here.
mean, yeah,
So
like,
I
but
think
again, it's just
think that
insane
reports
that Trump would go that far to, like,
interesting.
oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
This is
it's
gonna
gonna
be,
it's
this
gonna
is gonna
be
be an administration.
interesting, and
Like,
it's gonna be an administration of all time. Yeah.
we're already getting some jaw-dropping, insane stuff, and he's not even president yet. So, I mean, yeah, this is gonna be a wild ride for the next 4 years.
We'll be seeing how it goes. Anyways, I think that's about it for this video. Trump at 312, wrapping up all the swing states now. Republicans at 53 in the Senate, likely. Gonna take the House at 220 to 221. And hey, make sure you keep an eye on these cabinet picks. They're dropping, like every day. They're dropping like flies, really. Every single one just keeps coming in, buzzing into the room. A new name, a new bold name too, that drops every single day. So make sure you keep track of that, because if it gets even crazier from here, I honestly don't know how that would even go. I mean, maybe he'll name Vladimir Putin into one of these. Not sure what's going on, but anyways. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave a like on this video down below. Comment down below who else you think Trump's going to be appointing in here. Name some people. We're interested to see what you have. Subscribe to the channel for future updates on the Trump presidency because it's going to be way more fun and way more interesting than the Biden presidency. Uh, Subscribe
Fun.
for our future looks at 2025, 2026, and 2028 because we'll be doing that as soon as this election fully wraps up. And yeah. Share this video with your family and friends. Thanks for watching.
See you guys.